In the United States tonight, over 770,000 people will sleep without a home. But that's not the story you're being sold. The story you're being sold involves a park bench, a cookie, and tears designed to go viral. This is the hidden architecture of the empathy bait industry, where genuine suffering meets staged salvation, and the most vulnerable pay the price for our clicks. It begins with a single, perfect image: a weathered man on a bench, a tiny girl with a cookie, an offering that seems to transcend words. This scene is engineered to bypass your critical mind and target your heart directly. But who constructed it, and what happens after the camera stops rolling? To understand the real cost of these viral moments, we must dissect the first rule of the empathy economy: nothing is accidental, especially innocence. The blueprint is no secret. It's called the kindness click formula, and it's taught in creator workshops and analyzed in trend reports. You start with a protagonist in visible distress. The setting is public but isolated: a park bench, a bus stop, a neglected sidewalk. The visual cues are non-negotiable: weathered skin, worn clothing, a posture of defeat. This person represents a problem the viewer recognizes but feels powerless to solve. Then you introduce the agent of change. Often a child, sometimes a pet, occasionally an unexpected benefactor. Their action is simple, pure, and crucially non-monetary at first: a shared cookie, a bottle of water, a quiet moment of eye contact. The gesture is small enough to be believable, but profound enough to trigger a chemical reaction in the brain of anyone watching. Dopamine, the reward chemical, releases not because you performed the act, but because you witnessed it. The algorithm registers this engagement, the extended watch time, the share, the tearful emoji comment, as a signal of supreme quality. It pushes the video further. A feedback loop is born. Emotional manipulation fuels algorithmic amplification, which in turn demands more potent emotional manipulation. The stakes for creators are quantifiable. A single video meeting this formula can generate tens of thousands of dollars in ad revenue, sponsor deals, and boosted follow accounts. For platforms, it generates billions of data points on human empathy, mapped and sold to the highest bidder. But this is just the surface machinery. To understand the real impact, you must meet the two central, and often invisible, characters in every one of these productions. First, the architect. This is not always the person on camera. It's the producer, the director, the social media strategist in a rented WeWork office, studying analytics dashboards. Their currency is not compassion, but conversion rates. They know that a thumbnail featuring a child's hand reaching toward a homeless person has a 42% higher click-through rate than one featuring an adult's. They know videos titled with a question, like "What happens when a toddler gives her last cookie?" outperform declarative statements by a margin of 3 to 1. They commission location scouts to find the right, authentic bench. They have stylists on standby to ensure the child's pink jacket pops against the autumn leaves. Every frame is focus grouped, every reaction shot storyboarded. The second character is the prop. This is the homeless individual. Their real name is rarely used. Their backstory, the job loss, the medical debt, the veteran status, the mental health struggle, is either ignored or reduced to a two-sentence caption designed to maximize pity. They are presented not as a complex human with a history, but as an empty vessel for the audience's projected goodness. In the moment of filming, there is often a transaction, but it is rarely the one presented. The standard fee for participation ranges from $50 to $200, sometimes a hot meal, always the implied promise of exposure that might change their life. The unspoken contract is this: perform authentic despair, then perform authentic redemption, and you will be compensated for your time. What is not included in the contract is the aftermath. The architect packs up their camera. The prop is left on the bench, the $50 already earmarked for a night in a shelter or a fix that dulls the shame of having just sold their dignity for a viral moment. The video goes live. This is where the third character enters, the audience, which is you. You feel the lump in your throat. You share the video with the caption, "Faith in humanity restored." You feel a fleeting sense of moral accomplishment without having moved from your chair. The transaction is complete. You traded a moment of catharsis for your attention. The architect traded your attention for revenue. The prop traded their reality for a $50 bill and the eerie silence that follows once the crew drives away. But this system relies on a fragile illusion that the moment was spontaneous, that the kindness was pure, that the change was real. And what happens when that illusion shatters? What happens when the prop decides to speak? His name was David, and for 3 minutes and 42 seconds in October of 2023, he was the most famous homeless man in America. The video was titled "Angel on the Bench." It had all the hallmarks: the golden leaves, the weathered green jacket, the tiny girl in pink offering a chocolate chip cookie. It garnered 11 million views in 48 hours. The comments section was a cathedral of restored faith. But David, whose last name we are withholding at his request, remembers the morning differently. He remembers the producer, a man in his 20s with an expensive camera, approaching him at 7 a.m. with a proposition: $50 for an hour of his time. The little girl was the producer's niece. They did 7 takes. The cookie was stale. They told me to look down until I heard her feet shuffle, David would later tell a journalist. Then look up slow. Let the tears come if they come. I didn't have to fake the tears. The shame was real. After the crew left, David sat on that bench for 2 more hours, the $50 in his pocket feeling like a burn. He used it to buy a week's worth of hostel beds. The video continued to spread, monetized by pre-roll ads and a sponsorship from a snack brand. David received nothing beyond the original 50. This is the first rupture. The prop gains a voice. And with that voice, he asks a question that threatens the entire economy. What if the redemption was not just staged, but stolen? The backlash against David was swift and vicious. Online, he was called an ungrateful liar, a grifter trying to sabotage a beautiful moment. The video's creator, a channel called Heartfelt Moments, released a statement saying they had acted with the purest intentions and that David had been compensated fairly and consented. They did not disclose their ad revenue, estimated by analytics firms at over $70,000, but David's story did not disappear. It found its way to a non-profit legal aid group specializing in digital rights, and that's when the story splits open, because David's case was not unique. It was a template. The legal team, led by a lawyer named Anya Sharma, began collecting testimonies. They found a woman in Los Angeles who had been paid $75 to pretend to be a homeless veteran receiving a birthday cake. They found a man in Chicago who was given $100 to act overwhelmed when a creator surprised him with a new sleeping bag, a sleeping bag he was required to return after filming. They uncovered a network of freelance producers who sold prepackaged kindness video kits to influencers, complete with scripts, location recommendations, and a roster of willing homeless participants they called talent. The scale was staggering. Anya's team identified over 200 videos from the past 3 years that followed the exact same narrative arc, often using the same locations and even the same homeless individuals, now recognizable to each other in the system. This was not random charity. It was a production line, and at the center of this production line was a cold, algorithmic truth. Platforms like YouTube and Facebook do not have policies against staged acts of kindness. They have policies against deception that causes harm. But how do you measure the harm of manufactured hope? The legal argument Anya began to build was novel, that these videos constituted a form of commercial exploitation and fraud. The fraud was not against the viewer, but against the subject. The subjects were being paid a pittance to perform emotional labor, their authentic trauma used as a prop to generate millions in revenue for someone else. They were, in essence, uncredited actors in their own humiliation, dennied residuals, but to prove it, they needed a smoking gun. They found it in an unlikely place, the metadata. One of the producers, facing a separate lawsuit, turned over hard drives. On them were spreadsheets. Columns listed homeless individuals by first name, physical descriptors, and their reaction score, a 1 to 10 rating on their ability to cry on cue. Another column noted the payout. Another listed the video's final earnings. The correlation was grotesque. The higher the reaction score, the more the video earned. The subject's payout never changed. This was the pivot. This wasn't just about bad actors. It was about a systemic, data-driven harvesting of human empathy. The spreadsheet was a map of a new kind of factory, where the raw material was dignity and the product was a feeling. The legal team took this evidence to the platforms. The response was a masterclass in bureaucratic deflection. The platforms stated they could not intervene in content that did not violate their community guidelines. Since the subjects had consented, however meager the terms, and since the videos did not depict illegal activity, they were deemed acceptable. The real issue, a platform representative said anonymously, was that this content performed too well. It was, in the cold language of engineering, highly engaging. To restrict it would hurt the platform's metrics. And so, the machine kept running, even as its gears began to grind. Because David's story had ignited something else. A quiet mobilization among the subjects themselves. They began to find each other in shelters, in soup kitchens, connected by the shared experience of seeing their own pain repackaged and sold back to them. They started a loose network, warning each other about certain producers, sharing information. They called themselves the Receipts, a bitter joke about the only proof they had of their participation. But one man within this network decided to go further. His name was Marcus, and he was about to turn the camera around. Marcus did not have a $20,000 camera. He had a 3-year-old smartphone with a cracked screen and 2 hours of battery life. What he did have was a plan, forged in the quiet resentment of the Receipts network. He would document the documentary. For 2 weeks, he followed a mid-tier influencer known for his street grace videos. Marcus filmed from across the street, from bus stops, recording the setup, the multiple takes, the brief exchange of cash, the dejected walk of the helped person after the crew's cheerful departure. He compiled the footage into a raw 20-minute video. He didn't edit for drama, he simply showed the machinery. Then he posted it. He called it The Receipt. It went viral for entirely different reasons. It wasn't heartwarming, it was horrifyingly mundane. The view was from the other side of the glass, and it changed everything. The public reaction split into 3 distinct, warring factions. The first was outrage. A significant portion of the audience felt genuinely betrayed. The emotional currency they had spent, their tears, their shares, their sense of moral uplift, had been debased. They flooded the original kindness videos with angry comments, accusing the creators of fraud. The second faction was denial. These viewers argued that the ends justified the means. If the video inspired people to be kind, did it matter if it was staged? They attacked Marcus's credibility, asking why a homeless man had a smartphone, dismissing him as bitter. The third and most troubling faction was the nihilistic embrace. Some creators, seeing the controversy as pure engagement fuel, leaned into it. A notorious channel released a video titled, "We faked giving a homeless man a car, and his reaction is priceless." The deception was now the punchline. The stakes had escalated from exploitation to a full-blown crisis of credibility, but the real tremor was felt in the influencer ecosystem. Brands began to pull sponsorships. The snack company that had partnered with Heartfelt Moments quietly terminated its contract. The ad revenue on dozens of similar videos plummeted as YouTube's system demonetized them for reused content and misleading metadata, a technical response to a moral firestorm. The architects were under siege, and then the most famous creator of them all entered the chat. His name was Kyle Jensen, known to his 27 million subscribers as Kyle of Goodwill. His channel, built on lavish gifts to struggling families and surprise scholarships, had an almost untouchable aura of sincerity. He released a 16-minute video titled, "The Truth About My Videos." In it, seated in a modest-looking room, he admitted that while the recipients were real and the gifts were real, the moments of surprise were often staged for optimal filming. Families were prepped. Reactions were guided. He framed it as a necessary evil to tell the most impactful story. The video was a masterpiece of reputation management. It was confessional enough to seem honest, but strategic enough to protect his core brand. He ended with a pledge to be more transparent. His subscribers largely forgave him. The controversy for him was a speed bump, but for the smaller channels it was a cliff. The Heartfelt Moments channel, the one behind David's Angel on the Benchy video, was not so lucky. The combined pressure of the lawsuit discovery, Marcus's expose, and the advertiser exodus triggered an internal collapse. The producer, in a desperate bid for sympathy, gave an interview to a news website. It was a catastrophic miscalculation. He said, "We're not the bad guys. We're giving the audience what they want. They don't want the complicated truth about housing policy. They want a 3-minute fairy tale where Cookie fixes everything." The quote was incendiary. It confirmed the audience's deepest suspicion. They were being fed a narrative they were too simple-minded to resist. The channel was deleted within a week, but the vacuum didn't last, because the algorithms still craved the emotional engagement that this genre provided. They simply found a new source. This is the "it gets worse" moment. The platform's response was not to meaningfully curb the practice, but to automate it. AI entered the stage. Tech startups began offering empathy bait as a service. You could now input parameters, setting, character types, desired emotional arc. A generative AI would produce a script. Deepfake technology or inexpensive stock footage of actors could create the visuals. A synthetic voiceover could deliver the soaring, emotional narration. The resulting video required no homeless participants, no producers in the field, no ethical dilemmas at all. It was exploitation, now fully divorced from human subjects. It was cruelty-free cruelty. The final layer of absurdity was upon them. The public was now outraged by real exploitation, but soon would be soothed by fake exploitation that harmed no one. The moral high ground had become a hall of mirrors. And in the center of this storm, the original problem, the 770,000 people without homes, remained untouched by the viral cycles of outrage and redemption. Their reality was not a 3-minute narrative with a happy ending. It was a compounding crisis of policy and economics, a story too complex and depressing to trend. Marcus's documentary had won a battle, but revealed a far more daunting war. He had exposed the scam, but the market had simply evolved beyond the need for real people. The legal team, led by Anya Sharma, watched this development with a profound sense of irony. Their lawsuit was now targeting a business model that was already being abandoned by its most savvy operators. The discovery of the spreadsheets, their smoking gun, was becoming a relic. The new evidence was lines of code. The question that ended Act 2A, what happens when the prop speaks, had been answered. The system listened, shrugged, and built a robot to replace him. The human cost was now irrelevant to the product. But as the platforms finally, under immense public and regulatory pressure, announced new guidelines against deceptively staged reality content, a single, unresolved thread remained. It was not about the videos that were made. It was about the help that was never given, the resources that were always just off camera. The real story was the gap between the performance of charity and the substance of change. And that story was just beginning. The lawsuit settled out of court. The terms were confidential, but Anya Sharma called it a symbolic victory with real teeth. The production company behind Heartfelt Moments was dissolved. The spreadsheet evidence was entered into the public record, creating a legal precedent that emotional labor, even by homeless individuals, had calculable value and required fair compensation. It did not end the practice everywhere, but it sent a shockwave through the freelance producer networks. The cost of getting caught was now quantifiable. David, the man from the original bench, used his portion of the settlement to secure a subsidized apartment. He volunteers now at a shelter, advising others on digital rights. He keeps a printout of the spreadsheet framed on his wall. He says it reminds him that his dignity was worth more than $50. Marcus, the man who filmed the receipt, found an unexpected second act. His raw footage was picked up by a documentary team and expanded into a feature-length film that toured festivals. He now works as a consultant for nonprofits, teaching them how to create authentic advocacy content without exploitation. He still uses the same cracked smartphone. The influencer ecosystem underwent a painful correction. The kindness click genre didn't disappear, but it mutated. A new label emerged: Verified Impact. Channels that partnered with established charities showed long-term follow-ups with subjects and disclosed all funding. The audience, burned once, demanded transparency. The engagement metrics for these honest videos were lower, but the subscriber loyalty was deeper. The fairy tale was over. The complicated work had begun, but what about the AI, the synthetic empathy machines? That story took the strangest turn. The startups that offered AI-generated kindness videos found an initially hungry market among smaller influencers looking to avoid ethical risk. But the audience could sense the hollow core. The comments on these videos were filled with a new word: soulless. The engagement metrics plummeted. It turned out the most crucial ingredient in the empathy equation was the belief, however naive, in a real human connection. The algorithm, in its relentless optimization, began to deprioritize the synthetic content. The machines had failed to replicate the one thing they were designed to mimic: genuine feeling. In a final, ironic twist, the most successful content to emerge from the ashes was not about giving, but about listening. Channels sprung up dedicated to long-form interviews with homeless individuals, not as props in a redemption arc, but as experts on their own lives. They discussed policy, systemic failure, and personal history. The videos were slower. They didn't trend as fast, but they built communities focused on actual solutions, donating to housing trusts, volunteering at policy advocacy groups, supporting mental health services. The viral energy was being redirected, drop by drop, into institutional change. And this is where we find the surprising final detail. The city where David's original bench sits, spurred by the local controversy and the sustained advocacy of groups using this new model of storytelling, passed a Housing First initiative. It allocated funds not for temporary shelters, but for permanent supportive housing. The funding mechanism was partly modeled on the economic data from the lawsuit, a calculation of the societal cost of exploitation versus the investment in stability. The bench in the park is still there. The golden leaves still fall, but now a small, discreet plaque is fastened to one arm, installed by the city's Parks Department after a petition by residents. It doesn't mention the viral video. It lists the phone number for the local housing advocacy hotline and a simple line: "Real help starts here." The cookie was a prop. The tears were directed, but the backlash was real. The legal precedent was real. The reallocation of attention and resources, however incremental, is real. The story of the homeless man and the toddler was a fiction that exposed a truth. We are starving for real connection in a marketplace of manufactured feelings, and when we reject the forgery, we create the space for something authentic to grow. This is not an ending with a bow tied on it. The homelessness crisis continues. New forms of digital exploitation are being coded right now, but a line was drawn, a price was set. And a handful of people, once used as backdrop, rewrote the script. They proved that the most powerful counter-narrative to a staged salvation is a messy, complicated, and relentless demand for justice. The camera can be turned around. The microphone can be passed. The question is no longer what happens when the prop speaks, but what we are willing to build after we finally listen. So what does this story tell us, beyond the specifics of one viral video and the industry it spawned? It reveals a fundamental tension in our digital age. We possess a deep, human craving for connection and moral clarity, a desire to see goodness affirmed in a complex world. Yet we interface with that world through systems designed to commodity our attention, to package our noblest impulses into the most efficient containers for clicks. The park bench, the cookie, the tears, they were never the problem. The problem was the distance they created. They offered the feeling of solving a problem without the hard work of engaging with the problem itself. They allowed us to pay our emotional tax and consider our debt to humanity settled. Real change is not photogenic. It is policy meetings and budget allocations and long-term support. It is the unsexy, relentless work of addressing root causes. It does not fit neatly into a 3-minute narrative arc. The choice we face is not between caring and not caring. The data proves we care deeply. The choice is between the easy catharsis of a staged redemption and the harder, more meaningful engagement with an unresolved reality. This channel exists to explore that harder engagement, to sit with the stories that don't have easy answers, that implicate us in their telling, that demand more from us than a passive tear. We believe that understanding the machinery behind the emotion is the first step toward reclaiming our humanity from the algorithms that seek to simulate it. If you believe in that work, if you want to be part of a community that values depth over distraction, then subscribe. Leave a comment below about a time you looked beyond the viral story to understand the system behind it. Share this documentary with someone who questions the feel-good narratives in their feed. We don't shout here. We don't chase trends. We build a space for the stories worth staying for the questions worth sitting with. Thank you for listening.